man, as a role model, as somebody who I looked at in my teenage years, in my boyhood, childhood, adolescent years, looked at as somebody who had lived life, had experienced life,
Hmm.
had served his country, and had gone back to continuing to wear the uniform and raise these young knuckleheads in a JROTC.
Welcome to episode 5 of your favorite teacher's favorite teacher podcast, where our special guest today is John Pappas. Okay. Welcome back to another wonderful day as we get into the next episode of your favorite teacher's favorite teacher podcast. And today, I got a very special guest with me today. One of my Marines, if I can say that, even though both of us have been out of the Corps for a while. Once a Marine, always a Marine. But my young Marine has decided to come into the profession of being a teacher. So I'm going to let him go ahead and introduce himself today.
My name is John Pappas. I met this gentleman almost 20 years ago.
Yeah,
Almost 20 years ago. Yeah, you're welcome.
wow.
It's not the same man that I met 20 years ago. He's much calmer now. Um, Spent 9 years in the Marines. Got out in 2015. Decided to start taking the road to becoming a teacher in 2017. And yeah, I went to University of Houston Clear Lake, sister college of U of H. So yeah, we're the Hawks. Um, yeah.
Awesome. Yes. And on today, Mr. Pappas here, like he said, is going through that process of becoming a teacher. And I love to grab individuals, especially like my young Marine, who I know is going to do fantastic things when he gets into the education profession because he was a good Marine. A
You don't have to lie.
good
You don't have to
Marine.
lie. I was the best Marine at being me.
That's
I
true.
was the
Hey,
best at being me.
absolutely. Um, and and with that, I would like to start our podcast off with the beginning of our podcast, which I like to call the journey. So, in this part of our podcast, what I like to have the guests do is tell our audience about the journey that they've taken to get into education. And like we said before, we know that you're still on that journey to get into education. But just tell them what it's like to go through that process to become a teacher.
Yeah, so I have two children of my own.
Mm.
I like being involved in their lives and their school, meeting their teachers, going through the whole process of, volunteering at the school, chaperoning, doing all that stuff. That gave me more of an insight as far as being an absent, out of the education world father, outside looking in, just helping with homework at the kitchen table. So I got more information from, just being involved in my children's education, that I started looking into more of the idea of becoming a educator myself. When I started the process back in 2017, I was going to school on GI Bill.
Right.
So I was just going in for general education. I found my niche in history. So I started pursuing just a bachelor's of arts for history, and then in 2001, I turned around and decided to focus on the College of Education. So going through the College of Education, it was interesting. I started taking a lot of teaching courses and methods courses, and just any type of classroom management course, and just different things to help try to get me prepared. And the more classes that I took, the more intricate the degree plan became. It was no longer just I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to stand in front of a classroom and I'm just going to teach kids for 7, 8 hours a day, and then I'm gonna pack up and go home. It became a lot more investing into the students as a, uh, a person that they would actually potentially look up to.
Right.
So then it turned into I am now venturing into this as the potential of becoming a positive male role model for a student who might not have that at home.
Yes.
So then it became more of a morality calling, and no longer just a 9 to 5 job or you know something to pay the bills. It became more of a I want to do this because I look back at growing up without a father in the house
Hmm.
and how I reached out towards the male teachers to provide me some sort of semblance of respect that I should aspire to be. So
Right.
it definitely became more investment in, I guess, the responsibility to the students
Right.
than the responsibility to, I guess, just the idea of having a stable job.
Right. And a lot of people don't fully understand that this profession is not one that you get into for the money, or as I hear people saying, getting the summers and weekends off. That's really not the case. Education is about being able to make a difference in a young person's life, because the children are our future,
Absolutely.
and to actually be a part of making those individuals, um, or impacting those individuals as they become something great, then that's a feeling that not a lot of professions are going to be able to say that they can do. So that's your journey, and that you're continuing on
Right.
right now, to come into the profession of education. So with that, I'm going to jump into the next portion of our podcast. The next portion of the podcast I like to call the yin and the yang. I call it that because we have our good days and our bad days in education. Now, you haven't been in the classroom. Well, what a lot of people don't know is in the Marine Corps, we are teachers. Like, there is nothing that we don't do to where we don't teach Marines. We teach young Marines. I know that I've had to teach this young man quite a bit about supply, even though he thought he already knew everything that there was to know. Uh, but what people don't understand is that even in Marine Corps, we had days that we set aside to train, to teach other Marines how to do things. And so, what I'd like you to do today is talk about that great day that you had trying to reach out and teach a Marine, and that horrible day that you had trying to teach a Marine. Give us the yin and yang of just teaching.
So it's funny. Since I've been taking these college of education classes, and I've been learning about the TEEPs,
Mm-hmm.
and in the Marines we had TLOs and
ELOs,
ELOs.
yep. Terminal learning objectives and enabling learning
Enabling them. Yep, yep.
objectives.
And
Yeah.
everything that we did was basically set up like a lesson plan. We had to have our TLOs, we had to have our ELOs, and we had to
Mm-hmm.
be able to, have some sort of way for them to grasp the concept, whether
Right.
it be a test at the end of it or practical application at the end of it, something to show that they can retain the knowledge and use it. So I guess you had just left the unit.
Okay.
You were up at airspeed.
Yes.
Uh, they had put me on night crew when you were still there. They had me on night crew the entire time, but they decided that it would be a good idea to start sending me all of the new Marines.
Ooh.
They sent me every single new check-in. They would spend a week on night crew with me, and then they would go back to day crew,
I do
and
remember
they
that.
would rotate them
I
out,
remember
and
that.
and it basically became that I was the training NCO for all of the inbound Marines,
Right.
and it became such a headache. I swear to God, it was the fresh out of boot camp wet behind the ears.
Yeah.
Yes, corporal, no corporal. Just calm down. I'm trying to just teach you this. There's nobody else here. Relax. We're here for 12 hours with no supervision. Calm down. I'm just here to teach you the job so you can go back to days and start executing. They ended up moving me back to days, I think, about 3 months later. And I had a Chief Warrant Officer 4 come up to me.
Okay.
And he tapped me on the shoulder and he was like, "You're Corporal Pappas, right?" I was like, "Yes, sir." And, stood up and he was like, "Somebody told me that if I needed to learn something, I should come to you."
Oh, wow.
And I was shocked. Just, I mean, you don't see a whole lot of Chief Warrant Officer 4s, and you definitely don't think that they're coming up to you asking you for anything.
Well, and for our audience, like a Chief Warrant Officer 4 is like a high-ranking officer that's been there and done that.
At least
So,
30 years, no less
yes,
than 30
yes,
years.
they've been around. They've seen a lot of stuff. They know a lot of stuff. And for one to come up to you and ask and to say that to you means that you knew your stuff.
Now, unfortunately for me, he was a transfer. He was not originally supply, so he did not know supply the way that I knew supply. But
Of course.
he came up to me. He said those amazingly kind words. I cried a little, and then I regained my composure and I answered his question. And I was walking him through the system, and I was showing him now Comus. Still remember,
now
20
Comus.
years.
Now
20 years.
Comus.
Still remember, now Comus and our supply.
Our supply.
I showed him what needed to be done and how to do it, and he had his little ditty book out, and he was taking notes, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, if word has traveled that within the first enlistment, that was within my first 3 years, my first 3 years, word had traveled from the lowest PFC inbound to the top of the chain CW04,
right?
That I am proficient in the reiteration and execution of the job itself,
right?
Then maybe there is a calling.
Yes.
And I never wanted to be supply. I got thrown into supply. I got kicked out of SOI, and they said, "Hey, needs of the Marine Corps, you're going to supply."
Hey.
So it happened, and I determined at that point that I didn't want to be there. But if I was going to be there, I was going to be the best of what I could.
Yeah, and you were a very knowledgeable Marine.
Knowledgeable. Yes.
I will say that. I will say that. It was an honor to be your staff NCO. I enjoyed that time that we had together, and it blossomed into a relationship even after the Marine Corps.
Absolutely.
Band of brothers for real.
Absolutely. I hated you in the Marines.
I mean, you should have. You should have.
Oh, man.
Staff Sergeant Stubblefield is nothing like Mr. Stubblefield. Nothing at all. Like Mr. I had to be that staff NCO, man. Hey, but now I don't have to be, and now I can be myself. So that was the yin and yang of being a teacher and educator in the Marine Corps. So now we're going to come to the part of the podcast that is the namesake of our podcast, which is your favorite teacher's favorite teacher. So in this part, what we're going to do is I'm going to have you talk about a teacher that has influenced you in a positive way, that maybe somebody that came to you in a time of need. You talked about how you didn't have your father and you reached out to somebody in education. Maybe you could tell our audience about that.
Absolutely. So I guess I would have to say the most influential person on my life, on my educational track, on everything, would have to be my JROTC instructor.
Oh, awesome.
It was the second year that the JROTC program had been introduced to the high school. So I was a freshman. I was ninth grade. It was the second year. So everybody that had been in that program was either a junior, senior, sophomore. I was the first wave of first-year freshmen.
Okay.
uh, Master Sergeant Joseph Lang. Great man. Horrible teacher. Horrible teacher. I don't even think he was certified for education. I know that he served 30 years. He was a master sergeant in the Army, and a JROTC program opened up, and he applied. He got the position, and boom, there he was. It was his first year. It was my first year, and as a man, as a role model, as somebody who I looked at in my teenage years and my boyhood, childhood, adolescent years, looked at as somebody who had lived life, had experienced life, had served his country, and had gone back to continuing to wear the uniform and raise these young knuckleheads in a JROTC program. And JROTC was, I thought JROTC was preparing me for the Marines. It was not at all anything. I learned rank. I learned general orders. I learned, stuff like that, which was great knowledge moving into the Marines. But he didn't yell a whole lot. So that was a wake up call. But I will say that I spent 4 years, my ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and senior year with him. Um, Joined every single team, just honestly to stay after school to, have a positive male role model, to
Right.
somebody to talk to after school, somebody to talk to in between classes, somebody to go on field trips and extracurriculars with. Did a lot of competitions. They ended up making me the battalion commander of the JROTC program my senior year. Got to work hand in hand with him almost 6 hours out of the day.
Oh
I
wow.
had late arrival, early release. I had teachers' aid periods
Hmm.
my senior year. So I was literally, my senior year, I was 6 hours minimum in JROTC before school, after school, out of the eight, 9 hour normal school day.
Right. Right.
Six of them minimum ROTC Monday through
Oh
Friday,
wow. Oh wow.
on top of Saturday competitions and everything else. So it was a lot of fun. But had he not have been that person, had he not have been that person that was there for me, I probably wouldn't have even joined the Marines.
Oh
I
wow.
probably wouldn't have. For me, it was either Marines or jail. It wasn't military or college for me.
Right.
No,
Right. Right.
no, 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 no. There was no college option after high school. It was Marines or jail,
Yeah.
and I think by him being the person that he was, by me latching and attaching the way that I did, uh, gave me the ability to want to be better, the ability to want to do more in life than live and die in the same small town.
Right.
So, huge shout out to him.
Yeah. Well,
Absolutely.
and that's the thing.
Horrible teacher. Horrible teacher.
Well,
Great. Great person. Oh my God.
and here's the thing about that. As I'm going through and doing these interviews, one of the things that comes up when people talk about their favorite teacher, one of the things that you don't hear them talk a lot about is what was what they learned in the content.
Mhm.
They talk more about what it is that their teacher did for them on a personal level.
Yep. Absolutely.
How it is that that person was either fair
Mhm.
to them, strict to them, had these standards that they wanted them to abide by to make them a better person. Because here's the thing. In the end, to me, a great educator reaches beyond the content
Mhm.
and reaches the person
Absolutely.
and makes the person better, puts them on the right track. And that to me is why I came into education. That's what I wanted to be able to do, to help to guide somebody that's going down that wrong path, kind of like I was, kind
Mhm.
of like you were, and just give them a little nudge into the right direction. Where they go from there is totally on them, but
Absolutely.
to be that person
Knowing
is,
that you could help change that path,
yes.
knowing that what you say and do could affect them in the long term. That for me in particular, with my situation in my life, if I hadn't had been given that opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
that interest, if he hadn't have shown that interest in me,
Right.
if I met him on an off day and I did not think I'm gonna and go back into JROTC my 10th grade year, and instead I did track or PE or
Mm-hmm.
anything else for that extra credit, I wouldn't have continued.
Wow.
So it was the timing, it was everything that I needed in that moment.
Wow.
And looking back on it, yeah, it could have gone completely different. I could be a completely different person. You and I never would have met.
Wow.
And you start
Wow.
thinking that existentially. You get into the metaphysics, and
Yeah. What
I
would
think, therefore I
Well, where would I be if I didn't have my little man bear pig with me? How crazy is that? But yeah, no, that's true. The that individual shifted your trajectory in life to where you are right
am. Absolutely.
now, and you have him to thank for that,
Absolutely.
and so many other people have that same story of how a teacher has touched their lives
Mm-hmm.
and put them on a trajectory to where they are. And it's great to hear that
Mm-hmm.
story. So at this point right now, we're coming to the end of the podcast, and we're coming to the last part that I like to call a word or a phrase. And here, I'm going to give you a word or phrase that deals with education, and I'll turn the floor over to you to talk about your feelings and your thoughts about that word or phrase. And we talked a little bit earlier before the podcast today, and the word or phrase that I got from our conversations is standardized testing. I want you to talk to our audience about your thoughts and your feelings about standardized testing. And I know that this is a hot button thing, and I have my feelings about standardized testing as well. But why don't you tell the audience about how you feel about
So for me, it is a hot button issue. For one, I'm not currently in a classroom. I don't currently. I'm not held to those standards at the moment. So I have my own ideology behind it, and I look at it more as what kind of teacher I want to be. And the teacher that I want to be is not one that focuses on the ability of the student based solely off of their passing of the standardized
it? Mm-hmm.
test. When you and I were speaking earlier, we were talking more along the lines of the philosophy behind education, the philosophy behind a student's ability to know their worth other than having the baseline of a standardized test to go off of. For me, I look at education the same way as I look at the ability to pick up a book and just read it. The ability. Can you formulate the phonemes and the phonics to read the words?
Right.
If you can, congratulations, you're one step. Next is the ability to comprehend it. Can you understand what the words mean when they are put together?
Mm-hmm.
Can you put them into a cognitive way of understanding? Then it's the ability to recall it. Can you pull from your syntax that information at a later date? Can you memorize Shakespeare? Can you reiterate the poem about the rain? Whatever. It could be anything. Um, and then it's the ability to reiterate. Can you, word for word, reiterate? Can you teach it to somebody else?
Right.
Can you understand it to the point of where it makes sense to you, to where you can help it make sense to somebody else?
Right.
And then there's the application. Can you apply it? Picking up a book on anatomy and open heart surgery. You could read it. You could read the words. You could read everything. It all makes sense. You can comprehend it. You understand blood goes in one way, heart pumps it in another way. Congratulations. You can understand it. You have the ability to read it. Could you reiterate it? Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can memorize certain sections. You can memorize the terminology of the valves and the names and everything else. You can memorize all of that, and then you could reiterate it. Could you apply it?
I would hope not.
Could you throw on some scrubs,
Oh,
put on gowns,
scary.
wash your hands, and then take a knife and start performing?
Right.
That's where standardized testing, in my mind, fails students.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that if you hand a student a standardized test over eighth grade algebra, they're going to take that test and they're going to pass or fail. And if they do not get 100, they might not know that they have a extremely high intellect and ability to comprehend advanced calculus.
Mm-hmm.
But because they fail or they don't pass with flying colors their eighth grade algebra test, they are never going to want to pick up an advanced calculus.
Yes.
They are never going to want to explore more or different avenues of mathematics
Mm-hmm.
because they have been held to a blanketed standard of eighth grade algebra. I look at it as if a student doesn't know where their limit is,
Mm-hmm.
the sky is that limit. They could choose to go in whichever direction.
Right.
And I think so much emphasis is put into standardized testing in order for financial grants, in order for titles, in order for accreditations, in order for everything else that isn't student focused.
Right.
Obviously, the better the grades, the better the school rating, the more
Yes.
money, the more
Yes.
money that impacts the instead of using that money to increase or enhance the facilities
Mm-hmm.
and better the gyms and increase the library, I think that there should be more emphasis on bettering the students themselves.
Okay. Well, I mean, yes, you're right. I personally, I witnessed, not in the education realm, but back in our military time, I witnessed the effects of standardized testing. There was a sailor that I worked with when I was stationed in Atlanta that when she was doing her job, like she was the best at it, like hands down, the best sailor in the office. But when it came time for her to take the test, her rate
Mm-hmm.
test to get promoted, like she had this anxiety
Yeah,
about taking the test to the
absolutely,
point that she never passed that test,
absolutely.
which held her back from getting promoted in a job that she was extremely proficient in. So what you're saying, it makes a lot of sense. And I agree with you. The only thing, like one of the assistant principals that I had the same conversation with pointed out to me is, you're right, but what is it that we're going to do to measure uh, students' ability to learn? So, I mean, I with the advent of project-based assessments and uh, assessing students in other manners, like I think that there's a conversation there that
Mm-hmm.
could be started to where we are getting away from these standardized tests to more performance-based.
Right,
Because when we were in the Marine Corps,
right.
like, yes, we had to take tests on paper,
Mm-hmm.
but when it came time to break that saw down,
Right.
we had to break that saw down and
Physically,
put
yeah.
it back together. So,
There's a book. I cannot remember the name of the author.
mm-hmm.
He's an educator. He has a TED talk, amazing TED talk. But it's called "If You Judge a Fish by Its
Ability
Ability
to
to
climb a
Climb a
tree.
Tree."
Yep.
Right. So when you take standardized testing,
Mm-hmm.
you're taking every single student down to the lowest level,
Mm-hmm.
and you're blanketing the entire community of students
Right.
and pitting them against each other on their ability to pay attention in class,
Mm-hmm.
read their textbooks,
Mm-hmm.
follow the assignments, do their homework. Did I say? I think I with this guy. But
Paying attention.
you're taking this entire blanketed population and you're giving them a test that pits them against each other.
Right.
So then you have these exact same students at the end of the test getting their results, and then looking at their friends and their peers and their counterparts and saying, "What'd you get? What'd you get? Oh, you got a 68. I got a 79. I'm smarter than you."
But that's not always the
and
case.
it's not always the case.
And see, and we can fall down this rabbit hole.
Absolutely.
Because here's the thing.
That's why it's a hot button.
I talk to my students about this too. It's I don't know if they covered this in your class, but Gardner's theories of multiple intelligence.
Yep.
So it talks about, how a kid may not be great at picking up a book, reading it, and doing and being able to do stuff based on reading it. But he says that same student could be great at doing numbers,
right,
or fantastic at illustrating their thoughts on paper. So his theory talks about there's a wide range of what students can do to show proficiency in their understanding of a concept. So, like, when I hear students in the classroom say things like, "Oh, I'm smarter than you," well, you may be smarter than them when it comes to this one particular thing, but have you seen this kid's artwork?
Absolutely.
Or have you tried to compete against this kid when it comes to math or music? So, like,
I look at it as the difference between BB King and Slash. BB King, I highly doubt BB King would ever be able to play guitar as good as Slash. But I know for a fact Slash would never be able to put the amount of soul and heart into his music that BB King does.
Right.
Both masters in their own respect.
Right.
Both extremely knowledgeable of the guitars, the harmonics, the fingers, the placements, the notes, the sounds, everything.
Right.
But you cannot compare the two when it comes to what they put in to how they have became a master, how they became that proficient.
Right.
So same thing with students.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
You cannot compare student by student, baseline by baseline, based off of a standardized test.
Well, like I say, we can go into some deep conversations about that, but the thing is like, people just have to understand that when it comes to education, when it comes to the individual person, like, our brain makeup, chemistry is not the same. This man right here, you put anything dealing with wood in front of him and he can make you the most beautiful things. But you do the same with me, I'm falling on my face. But you put anything dealing with technology in front of me, anything dealing with educational technology, I'm flying with that type of stuff. So to say that somebody is not smart because they can't do this over here, you negate all of the other talents and abilities that the individual has on the other end of the spectrum. So, like I say, man, we can talk about this for hours.
Absolutely.
But we have come to the end of the podcast, and at the end of the podcast, what I like to do is I like to give the guests the floor to talk, leave a message to the audience, say what you feel, and let the audience know where they can find you. What's your Instagram? What's your Twitter? Just like I turn over the floor to you to end the podcast off. Say your last words and let the audience know where they can find you.
Well, so I actually deleted all social media. Yeah, I'm completely off the grid.
As we can tell,
with the Grizzly Adams, yeah, absolutely. So I'm completely off the grid. Yeah.
Any last words you want to tell?
I guess last words is in my journey becoming an educator, I haven't started yet. There's been a lot of roadblocks. There's been a lot of barriers that have come up along
regular
life journeys that have caused setbacks. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, that have caused setbacks in this process. Um, One thing that I have never stopped wanting to do was be a positive male role model. That's the one thing that has been driving me the entire time. It's, do I think being a teacher is going to be the best job in the world? Probably not. I've been discouraged. I've been disheartened. I've had not millions. I've had plenty of people that I've come in contact with as former educators talking about how disheartening it is and how demoralizing it is. But that's their experiences.
Right.
One thing that has never discouraged me though is when I think about what kind of impact I would make. Oh, my personality, my energy, my vibe in the classroom has been something that I have looked at as I need to be in the classroom. It's not that I think it's going to be the most fulfilling thing for me ever. It's that I know the kind of man I am, I know the kind of person that I am, and I know that I could potentially be a Master Sergeant Lang to a young John Pappas. And if it's just one student, then that's all that matters.
Yeah.
So,
Oh. All right. Some powerful words. And that brings us to the end of the podcast. Thank you for joining us on your teacher's favorite teacher podcast. And we're out.
thank you for having me.
Peace. You so dumb.
I can chunk them up too, right?
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of Your Favorite Teacher's Favorite Teacher podcast. If you have a story you'd like to share, please contact me at wdstubblefield@wdsi.us. Again, that is wdstubblefield@wdsi.us. And you could be our next inspirational story of how educators impact our lives. I'm your host, Mr. Stubblefield, and I want you to remember, no profession is possible without your favorite teacher.